Hi, this is Professor Chakraborty, and today's lecture is on brain. Brain, which is the integral part of your body, is responsible to integrate all the sensory information and then transfer or deliver the information through the motor division throughout the body. Okay. So the brain is for higher motor functions. Okay, so there are several higher motor functions involved in our day-to-day activity, and it is the seat of mental function, of intelligence, of memory, and for emotions. The brain actually the volume is about 1,200 ml. And basically, the size of the brain is related with the size of the human body. So men usually have a slightly higher, 10% higher brain size than women, which is the reason being that the overall size of men are generally more or bigger. Men are, bigger than in weight than women. So it has been seen that there is no correlation the between intelligence and the size of the brain. Okay, so going forward, we need to understand some of the basic information about brain, and then we'll learn at length the details about its structure and function of the brain. Okay, so if you can see this page in here, this is basically a sheet of paper with so much information in here, right? So if I now crumble it, now you can see the surface area of this page, which was 8 by 11, now is turned out to be much more smaller. So at this point, the information that was in this page, written in this page, is all there, but now it is in a much more concise and a limited volume is in here. So brain actually holds in a lot of volume in a very, very small area. So more things to understand is, as we evolved, mainly from mouse to primates to humans, the size of human body increased a lot. Think about a mouse, think about a human body. So it increased a lot, but the size of the brain in comparison did not increase so much. Why? Again, going back to this example that we just learned, because it's in this very small region that all the information was contained. And for that, there were elevations, that is ups and downs, there were elevations and depressions, and that made it contained within a small surface area. In addition, the brain has many parts. Okay, many parts do several functions. Now think of a business where there is a managing director, where all the intellectual and all information passes and more decisions are made. Then there is a region where there is R&D, research and development, right? And then there is a region or a compartment or a chamber where there is marketing, then there is sales. So a business, whether it's a small or a large business, should have several offices, several compartments, several sections which do different work. Same thing in here. Brain also has several sections. Going back to the business example, now these compartments integrate amongst themselves. They talk to each other. And when they talk to each other, they execute one and only function, is the project being executed, right? The action being done. So integration or talking among these chambers or compartments or offices is so important. And I'm hoping all of you agree to that. Same thing in brain. There are compartments. There are majorly many regions in the brain, which we will learn. And all of these regions talk to each other, okay? They communicate with each other. Now, this is the plus side of it. This is the good part of it. But think of the other part of it is that there is something which is not so good in the process in which they, intermingle with each other, okay? For example, if there is an infection, since they talk to each other, since they have communication with each other, they tend to spread the disease fast. As a result, infection of brain can be very detrimental. Okay, so the compartmentalization is very important, very physiological, and we need it, but it has its down points also. Okay, so the brain actually is divided into 4 major regions, especially the cerebrum, I would say, is divided into 4 major regions. And we'll learn how the brain itself, the entire brain, is divided into 5 major regions. Let's do the 5 regions first. Number 1, it is cerebrum, which is the main part, which approximately covers 90% of your brain. Then there is diencephalon, then there is brainstem, and then there is the cerebellum. So we are talking about 4 different parts of the brain, because I said 5th because there is another area you will see, which we will do as insula, which we will touch upon it when we study the brain at length. Okay, so the 4 major regions of the brain, okay, the 4 major regions: cerebrum, diencephalon, brainstem, and cerebellum. Okay, in addition to that, the diencephalon, which is the second region that we were talking about, is divided into 3 major parts. Diencephalon is divided into 3 major parts. Number 1 is epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. And the brainstem again is divided into 3 major parts. Number 1, midbrain. Number 2, pons, and number 3, medulla oblongata. So those are the 3 major parts of the brainstem. Okay, so these different regions are there and they talk to each other. But we are right now talking about cerebrum, which was the first region of the brain, which occupies the major part of the brain. Okay, and the cerebrum is divided into 4 major parts. Number 1 is the frontal region. Number 2 is the occipital region. Number 3 is the parietal region, and number 4 is the temporal region. So these 4 parts or 4 regions of the brain processes or does different functions. They are compartmentalized, and there are many functions associated with it. So you're looking at the different how brain has evolved from rats to cats to dolphins to humans. You can see it in there. And how the main part, which is the cerebrum, as I said, has several ups and downs, crevices and elevations in order to accumulate all information. So let's understand some of the basic, how brain comes to its existence, or the embryology of the brain. So if you look in here, the CNS, or the central nervous system, begins with a hollow cylinder, the neural tube. So you can see the neural tube through which it develops. And this neural tube gives rise to 3 swellings called the primary brain vesicles. Okay, these primary brain vesicles then further develop into 3 major parts, which is known as prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and rubencephalon, which we will do in the next slide. So just going back to the preliminary, how embryologically it developed, the neural tube actually then develops into two major parts known as, or three major parts actually, endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. And each of these layers of tissue gives rise to different parts or organs of the body. Okay, so so the ectoderm is majorly responsible for the development of the nervous system. And when these neural tube forms a CNS, there are folds that develop, and you can see these folds that are being formed. And these folds actually further form what is known as the neural crest, which forms the PNS nervous system, or peripheral nervous system of the nervous system in general. Okay, so so as we were saying, that the neural tube actually divides itself into three major parts, which is called the primary brain vesicles. One is known as prosencephalon. The word, the meaning comes from pro means forward, so it's a forebrain. Mesencephalon is from the middle part, so it's known as midbrain. And rubencephalon is on the behind, so it's called hindbrain. So this is how slowly and steadily the brain develops into an adult brain. So if you look in here, the primary brain vesicles then develop into the secondary brain vesicles, right? So the prosencephalon that we learned, the forebrain divides to form telencephalon and diencephalon. Mesencephalon actually remains as such, and rubencephalon or hindbrain divides into two parts to form metencephalon and myelencephalon. Okay, so now these secondary brain vesicles further, as weeks go on during pregnancy, develop into an adult brain structure, which is very, very important to know. So the telencephalon divides to form an adult brain cerebrum. Okay, so this is the major part of the brain. Okay, it occupies the major part or the primary structure of the entire brain. The major 90% of the brain surface is the cerebrum. Okay, the diencephalon divides further to form three major parts: thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. Mesencephalon forms the brainstem, part of the brainstem, which is known as the midbrain. And metencephalon forms part of the brainstem again to form pons and cerebellum. And myelencephalon forms part of the brainstem again, which is the last part of the brainstem, which is known as the medulla oblongata. Now this further then continues into what is called the spinal cord. So going back, so initially from the neural tube, it divides to form prosencephalon, mesencephalon, rubencephalon. Prosencephalon forms telencephalon, diencephalon. Mesencephalon remains as such. Rubencephalon forms metencephalon, myelencephalon. Telencephalon forms cerebrum. Diencephalon forms thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. Mesencephalon forms midbrain. Metencephalon forms pons and cerebellum. Myelencephalon forms medulla oblongata. So this actually just shows you how in the fetus, the entire brain is developing into, gradually it is taking shape, forming the different structures, and the brain actually continues itself with the spinal cord. The brain, which is a highly sophisticated organ, right? It is a structure that is needed at every step of your life, of your decisions, needs protection. So as such, there are several lines of protection of the brain, of which the first is skull, blood-brain barrier, also known as BBB, meninges, and cerebrospinal fluid or CSF. Okay, so we'll do one at a time. So the cranial meninges. Okay, these are a connective tissue covering, right? There are three such. The cranial meninges, they are called the cranial meninges because there are spinal meninges. So when we learn spinal cord, we'll be learning about spinal meninges. So the cranial meninges are nothing but connective tissue covering that these separate and support the soft tissue of the brain from the bones of the skull or the cranium. And they protect the blood vessels, they protect the blood vessels and help the blood vessels to supply nutrients, oxygen to the brain. And they also help in circulating CSF, which is cerebrospinal fluid, which we will learn at length, the composition and circulation of it eventually. So there are three layers: dura mater, arachnoid matter, and pia mater. So as you can see, this is the dura mater, this is the arachnoid matter, and then this is the pia mater. So we'll start with the dura mater, right? The dura mater, the word dura, D-U-R-A, means tough, okay? It is external, it is on the outside, that's the reason it's external, it's outermost layer, tough, and it's a dense, irregular connective tissue. These are very strong. The dura mater is really strong, and it helps. There is actually very, very small space between the dura mater and the skull. Okay, so this dural space or epidural space is very, very small. Usually, if a space can be seen, usually it happens, the dura mater and the bones of the skull, if this epidural space can be seen, it is usually for any sort of an infection. There is a space, but that's very, very, the space is very, very small, okay? So whenever there are several hematomas or hemorrhages that happen, in those cases, the blood actually oozes and accumulates in that region. Then comes, which is known as the arachnoid matter. This arachnoid, the word arachnoid means spider web, and as you can see, it does look like a spider web, okay? And in between the dura mater and arachnoid matter, there is a subdural space, which contains cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, this is an important space, and remember, this subdural space becomes an actual space if blood and fluid accumulates there whenever there is a condition of subdural hematoma. Again, the same thing as I said in epidural space. This is very, very small. I would say that the space is a little thicker than that of the epidural space, but it becomes really visible whenever there is an hematoma in this region. The last is the pia mater. The pia mater is like a second skin to the brain. It tightly adheres to the brain and follows every contour of the brain surface. So the elevations and depressions are all, the pia mater actually covers it. Okay. I would actually like to go over one little information before we go ahead, which is a little bit of a clinical overview of epidural and subdural hematomas. So whenever there's a pooling of blood outside of the vessel, it is known as hematoma. Hematoma means, hemato means blood, oma, O-M-A means tumor. So whenever there is some blood vessels leak out and there is blood accumulation outside of the blood vessel, it is known as hematoma. In the brain region, there are two such very commonly known. One is known as the epidural hematoma. The other is known as subdural hematoma. Epidural hematoma is a blue pool of blood that forms near the epidural space of the brain, usually whenever there is a big blow in the head. You might have heard all elderly people falling, and that can result in epidural hematoma. If someone comes and hits someone's head with a baseball bat, that can lead to epidural hematoma, which is it's a severe neurological injury and can result in death. The subdural hematoma is a hemorrhage that occurs in the subdural space between the dura mater and the arachnoid mater, that space in there. These hematoma is usually because of ruptured veins, okay, caused by either fast or maybe very fast moving of the head, or it can be for a huge gush of blood flowing through them. Blood pools in this space compresses the brain. It puts a lot of pressure on the brain, and that can result in rupture of several neurons in the brain, which results in this hematoma. Okay. So this goes, the meninges. So you can remember meninges, from outer surface to the inner surface, as dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater as DAP, D-A-P, or you can remember it from inner to outer as PAD, P-A-D, pia mater, arachnoid mater, and dura mater. So now comes which is the ventricles. The ventricles, what are the ventricles? So first and foremost, what are the ventricles? The ventricles are cavities or expansion within the brain that are derived from the neural canal, okay? All ventricles are lined by ependymal cells. They contain cerebrospinal fluid, which if you remember, we have learned about them, that these ependymal cells are responsible for production and monitoring of the cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. The ventricles share some common communication with one another, as well as the central canal of the spinal cord. We have 4 such ventricles, 2 lateral, third and the fourth ventricle. So let's see. So these are the 2 lateral ventricles. You can see these are the 2 lateral ventricles. This is the third ventricle, and in here is the fourth ventricle, which continues into the central canal. Okay, so the 2 lateral ventricles are in the cerebrum. You can see it in here. It's in the cerebrum in this region. And it is partitioned by septum pellucidum, which is not very visible with naked eye. Within the diencephalon is a small thinner ventricle, which is known as the third ventricle. So in the diencephalon, it is the third ventricle. And the lateral ventricles are connected to the third ventricle by the interventricular foramen, also known as the foramen of Monro. So these are connected to the third by interventricular foramen. A narrow canal called the cerebral aqueduct, from the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle, it is connected by the cerebral aqueduct, or the mesencephalic aqueduct. It is connected with that. And there are several names for it. It's called mesencephalic aqueduct, or it is called the cerebral aqueduct, and formerly it was called the aqueduct of Sylvius. So all of them, whether you can name them any way you want, and this is primarily responsible to connect the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. Again, remember that just the fourth ventricle actually is in the pons and the cerebrum. Please don't forget, all these ventricles are lined with ependymal cells, and they are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. So these ventricles ultimately lead into the central canal, which is in the spinal cord. So you can see this is the fourth ventricle, which leads into the central canal. So these are the lateral ventricles. They are connected to the third ventricle by the interventricular foramen. And then the third ventricle is connected to the fourth ventricle by mesencephalic aqueduct or cerebral aqueduct. And then the fourth ventricle then leads into the central canal, which is in the spinal cord. So we spoke about the meninges, we spoke about the ventricles, and within the ventricles, what did we study? That these have cerebrospinal fluid. Yes, they do have cerebrospinal fluid, and this cerebrospinal fluid is one of the protective protections of the brain. How? Okay, so what is CSF? CSF is a clear, colorless liquid that that circulates. Let's see the next slide. Yes, this is a clear. The cerebrospinal fluid is a clear liquid that circulates in the ventricles and the subarachnoid space. Okay. The central nervous system and which consists of brain and spinal cord, throughout the brain and the spinal cord, the CSF circulates. Okay, it has some major important functions. Number one, buoyancy, so which is the brain floats within the CSF. That is, the brain is, you can see the weight of the brain is much higher. So if the brain does not float, it would basically sink into the spinal cord. So it does not let it do it. It basically floats the brain in air. Without the CSF to support, part of the heavy brain would sink through the foramen magnum, or which is the point where the spinal cord starts. Okay. Protection, the CSF actually provides a liquid cushioning to protect the delicate organs of the brain. When, basically any sort of drastic movement is protected by the CSF. For example, if you're walking in a swimming pool, the water actually of the pool resists your movement, right? Same thing in here. So the CSF actually, the fluid resists a drastic or a sudden movement so that the brain is not hampered. So any forceful or sudden movement by the skull or by the body is prevented by the CSF to protect the brain from any injury. Then the third one is environmental stability. The CSF transports nutrients and chemical messengers to the brain, and it also removes waste products from the brain. So it is a source of nutrient for the entire brain and the spinal cord. So it becomes a very important part for the brain protection. So cerebrospinal fluid, how it is formed? It is formed by the choroid plexus. So I want to point your attention to this part of the slide. If you see in here, these are the lateral ventricles. So we have two lateral ventricles, if you remember, and they are connected to the third ventricle by the interventricular foramina, and then through the cerebral aqueduct to the fourth ventricle. From the fourth ventricle, then it circulates to the subarachnoid space, and then it goes back to the venous circulation. From the heart and lungs, the arterial blood comes, and in the fourth ventricle, or as such, all the ventricles are lined by choroid plexus. So choroid plexus actually is in the, or it is responsible for the formation of cerebrospinal fluid. The choroid plexus is composed of layers of ependymal cells. So if you remember, we learned about ependymal cells in the neuroglial cells. So this is a kind of a neuroglial cells. These are supporting cells of the neuron. So these ependymal cells are responsible for production of CSF. So once they are formed by the choroid plexus, lined by the ependymal cells, then they can circulate throughout the ventricles, throughout the brain. So you can see the arrows that are shown in here is basically showing you the arrow by which the CSF moves throughout the brain and the spinal cord in the ventricles. So this is the introduction of the brain parts and its function. So we have 4 major parts of the brain, starting with cerebrum. As you can see it in here, this is the cerebrum, which occupies majorly about 99% of the brain structure. Then comes the diencephalon. The diencephalon consists of 3 parts, of which one is not shown in here. One is the epithalamus, which is mainly responsible for production of a hormone called melatonin. And then there is thalamus, there is hypothalamus. So 3 parts in diencephalon, epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. And then comes the brainstem, which is around here. So as you can see, the entire middle portion has been brought out. And this part in here is the brainstem, which consists of midbrain. We call it midbrain. Here it is written as mesencephalon, which was an older nomenclature. Then we have pons, and then medulla oblongata, which continues into the spinal cord. The 4th region in here is cerebellum. So 4 major parts. Number 1 is cerebrum. Number 2 is diencephalon. Number 3 is brainstem. And number 4 is cerebellum. So within diencephalon, there are 3 parts. Number 1 is epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Within brainstem, there are 3 major parts. One is midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. So let's understand a little bit an introduction of the functions of these brain parts. We'll learn in details as we go along, but the main functions of the cerebrum is it is for conscious thought processing. It is an intellectual function. This is where the command or all decisions are made of the brain for the different parts of the body. Okay, all skeletal motor movements, skeletal muscle movements are all orchestrated or directed from this region, which is called the cerebrum. Diencephalon. First part is epithalamus. As I said, we'll learn about that as we go along. Here is listed a thalamus. It is a relay and processing center for sensory information. So we have done this before, right? Sensory information are those that pass from the different muscle, from its receptors, or maybe the visceral organs through the receptors to the central nervous system. These take in the information to the central nervous system, which in here we are talking about brain. So those are sensory information, and this is where the sensory information is processed. Okay. Third is the one that is shown in here is hypothalamus. The word itself, hypo, means lower. So it's just below thalamus, and that's the reason it's known as hypothalamus. It is a center controlling emotions. Okay, it is a center where several hormone production takes place. So this gland is, or this part of the brain is also called a neuroendocrine part, because it is part of the nervous system, it's part of the endocrine system. So it's called a neuroendocrine gland because it controls the production and function of several hormones. It is also, as it's written here, is a center of many emotions like aggressive behavior or your loving someone. All those emotional factors are governed through this region. Then comes the brainstem, which consists of three major parts, as I said, is midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Midbrain, it is a center of two major processing center. One is the visual data is processed there, and number two is the auditory. So what you see and you can interpret that object is processed in this region, and what you hear and you can process it is also mainly controlled in this region. Then comes pons. The word pons means bridge. It is actually a relay center between the thalamus and the cerebrum. So it helps to move information to the cerebellum, which is around here, and to the thalamus, which is above it. Okay, it also will learn subsequently. It is also center where it helps a lot for medulla oblongata to do its function. Okay, so next comes the medulla oblongata. It is a relay center for sensory information, as we just learned what is sensory information. It takes up the sensory information and then transmits it, basically gives it to the cerebrum, you know, this part in here where mainly all the control is going on. The other one of the major functions of medulla oblongata, it is a center of many activities, which means that it is a regulatory system where it regulates the cardiovascular, respiratory, and digestive system activities. What it means is it keeps the rhythmicity, it causes the heart pumping with a rhythm, and that rhythmicity is controlled by the medulla oblongata. We'll learn this more in details when we learn the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, and see the role of medulla oblongata in there. But right now, just remember, it is a center for the regulation of visceral function, for example, cardiovascular, respiratory, and digestive system activities. Cerebellum, which is on the posterior end of the brain, is mainly for balance. Okay, it coordinates complex motor pattern. It adjusts the balancing. You can walk in a straight line because of cerebellum. In addition to that, it is also responsible for fine motor function, and we learn all of it as we go along. Okay. So we are going to start majorly with cerebrum, which covers a major part of the brain. And as you can see it in here, there are several ups and downs, which are these elevations and depressions in here, right? These elevations are called gyri, and these depressions are known as sulci. Okay, so very important to remember that these are elevations are gyri or gyrus, depressions are sulci or sulcus. Now, when these depressions or sulcuses becomes little deep, they form what is known as a fissure. Okay, so fissure is a deeper groove, and we know of a very large fissure that is present in the brain, which is the largest, which is known as the longitudinal fissure, which actually divides the brain into two equal halves. Okay, so it's called the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, and the longitudinal fissure basically divides it into two halves, and we learn that more as we go along. What you see in here is shown in beautiful colors in blue, green, red, and pink, the different lobes of the cerebrum. So what are these lobes? These are four in number. Number one, there is frontal lobe, there is parietal lobe, there is temporal lobe, and there is occipital lobe. So if you, so basically, if you look in here, the frontal lobe is in the front part of your of the brain. The occipital lobe is behind and the back. The parietal lobe is near the top in the central region, and the temporal lobe is near your ears. So let's learn a little bit of these lobes. The frontal lobe lies deep into the frontal bone. You learned that in skeletal system, and basically forms the anterior part of the cerebral hemisphere. There are several sulcuses and gyruses within the frontal lobe, and the main function is voluntary motor functions. It is responsible for verbal communication, decision making, planning, and personality. Okay, so it is a very, very important lobe because all your decisions and intellect is centered in here. Next comes the parietal lobe. This parietal lobe lies deep into the parietal bone and forms the superior posterior part of each of the cerebral hemisphere. Its main function is involved with the general sensory function, such as evaluating a shape or texture of an object being touched. So if you touch an object, you find it silky. You touch an object, you can say that it is rough. All of these basically evaluating the shape and texture is determined by the parietal lobe. The temporal lobe is internal to the temporal bone, and it is involved in hearing and smell. Okay. The last, which is behind on the posterior end, is the occipital lobe, lies internal to the occipital bone, and it is mainly responsible for processing incoming visual information and storing visual memories. Very important lobe. It takes in visual information and stores the visual memories in the form of visual memories. So these are the four major lobes of the cerebrum, but deep inside the cerebrum, there is another lobe which is known as insula. Okay, so insula is, the word insula means island. It's a very small lobe, and it is really deep into the lateral sulcus. It is not very well studied, but we know that it is involved in memory and interpretation of taste. Okay. So this actually, whatever I've said so far is written in words, so you can read through them. This is the frontal lobe, how it is involved in the motor function, in concentration, verbal communication, decision-making, planning, and personality. Parietal lobe is mainly responsible for evaluating shape and size and texture of the object. Temporal lobe, which is involved in hearing and smell, and occipital lobe is responsible for visual information, processing of the visual information, and also it stores visual memories. Okay, and insula, which lies deep inside it, is mainly responsible for memory and interpretation of taste. So basically, just a recap, there are mainly four visible lobes and one inside, which is the fifth lobe, the insula. The four lobes are parietal, frontal, occipital, parietal, and temporal. Okay, so the four of them. So let's now understand some other little bit of the cerebrum in little more details, because it is highly important. And we know that it consists of two major parts. It is divided into two major halves, left and the right cerebral hemispheres, by a fissure. So it's a deep fissure, it's a deep cleft which divides the brain into two halves, which is known as the left hemisphere and is known as the right hemisphere. I want you to understand that these two hemispheres apparently look the same, but their functions are very different. Okay, so you have to understand that. And these hemispheres do talk to each other. They are connected with each other either by bundles of axon that go across from left and right, or sometimes they can go from top to bottom. Okay, so the largest tract that connects the left and right hemisphere is known as corpus callosum, and it is a method by which these two hemispheres communicate with each other. It has been seen that the width of the corpus callosum is different between males and females, or between gay individuals, lesbians, and straight individuals. Okay. So now we are trying to understand the two hemispheres. Okay, how does the two hemispheres differ from each other?